Hello and welcome back to another edition of GNAT-TV's In-Depth series. I'm Andrew McKeever, the news director at GNAT-TV's News Project. It's a pleasure to have you with us today on Monday, November 20th. It's also a great pleasure to bring back together our real estate trio here. It's been a while since we've all been together, over a year and a couple of months. I think August of 22 was the last time we had these three folks here together, and that was on a Zoom call. Even better to be here in person in the studio. That's really great.
Indeed.
So we're really pleased to welcome Steve Stetler, who is a realtor with Four Seasons Sotheby's. Jennifer Prouty-Hoffman is the principal broker and owner of Hoffman Real Estate. And Greg Cudler is also a realtor with Four Seasons Sotheby's. Thank you all for making the time for this conversation.
Great to be back.
Thank you.
Live.
Live, yes, right, in person. Yeah, well, we've had a couple of conversations now over the past 3 years or so about the state of the real estate market here in southwestern Vermont. And I should probably point out before we get too deep into this that Steve sort of has a market area up on the mountain towns, Londonderry, Winhall, Stratton, that area. Jennifer is Sunderland and south into Bennington, and Greg is Manchester, Dorset.
Right. Northshire.
All right. So we've been talking about the real estate market because, as you all know, that's been a big story since the pandemic. Real estate values shot up like crazy, and in the spring of 2020. And well, so we have these three folks here to tell us kind of what's going on now. And I guess let's start there. Steve, let me have you get us started here. What is your sense of the market at this point? It seems, from my perspective, that things have cooled off a little bit since they were, let's say, a year and a half ago. Is that the case, though? Or?
Certainly in my market. They've cooled off, but I think in a healthy way. I think I would more say stabilized than cooled off. Nationally, we have an inventory problem still, so that, and we're suffering from that as everyone is. But I find, and our area is finding, that there's still tremendous interest on the part of buyers. Buyers are very well educated now, though, because they've had time to look. They've often been disappointed a number of times and not succeeded, and they're being more careful with what they do. There's still sales that go with multiple offers above ask. There was a $1.5 million sale in my area recently that went sight unseen, but that was much more common back in the COVID days. And now people are taking their time, pouncing when they find the right one, but definitely not afraid to do inspections, negotiate. So it's slowed in what I see as a healthy, proper way. I feel we're holding our value in the area. We're sometimes even going a little bit beyond still, which is wonderful for people's equity. And I think we're going to, for some time, see a healthy, if steady and slower market.
Right.
Okay. Jennifer, what's your take on it?
Yeah, so in the Bennington and beyond market, I really work predominantly Pownell, Bennington, Shaftesbury, Arlington, Sunderland. We have seen the peak days behind us in terms of the top values that properties are fetching. There are still some sellers that are trying to achieve that peak price, and we are seeing a lot of price reductions in the South Shire now. So ultimately, you're still getting a lot more than you would have gotten in 2020 or 2021, but you're not seeing that peak that we saw a year ago. There's still a lot of buyer activity. In general, wintertime is a great time to sell because you have serious buyers. It's not really a lot of fun to go out and look at houses in the wintertime when it's freezing cold and you're all bundled up. And so really the tire kickers take a break, and serious buyers are looking in the wintertime.
All right. Greg?
I think inventory is the big story, and we just don't have a lot of inventory. And when something comes on that's in great shape, you can bet that there's going to be multiple offers still in our area. And I just was in a situation in Dorset where, interestingly, a price came down by about $50,000, and then right after that there was intense interest.
And that's
So-
interesting because I think down in the South Shire, it's definitely on the more conservative end of things. It might be slightly under the list price if the buyers feel that it's a bit of an aspirational price, maybe a little higher than what market will bear right now. So we are actually seeing some offers that are getting accepted under the list price and probably no more than 5% over. So I think that
Right,
really is a
right.
bit more market specific in terms of the demand.
Well, and in that case, the price had just come down already.
Yes,
So, but it
absolutely.
probably wound up close to where they were originally. You know, so price is a factor, especially in a tight market for sellers and obviously for buyers. But it was instructive for me, that one scenario.
So it's interesting, the glory days of selling properties sight unseen and or just through a video and all that sort of gone by the wayside a little bit. I guess what kinds of properties are selling? Is it mainly still like sort of that missing middle range there that we hear about a lot when we hear about building new housing projects? That sort of in between, you know, I'm not sure what the numbers would be, let's say $300,000 to $600,000 roughly, or are the properties on the higher end still the ones that are attracting the most amount of interest?
So I'll say that in my market, there's actually a lot on the market right now in the $400,000 to $600,000 range. So that price point has slowed down in terms of the buyer demand. And then between $150,000 and $300,000 is a hot price point for us. So if you come on the market in great condition, in desirable location, and you are right at the market price, not being too aggressive, not really shooting for the moon, but if you come in really where the buyers feel, yes, that is a price that I'm willing to pay, you are still going to see multiple offers and a very quick sale. But the higher end prices down in the South Shire are taking a bit longer now. We're seeing typical days on market closer to 2 months rather than 2 days.
Right.
Interesting. And what about interest rates? I mean, we've all heard a lot about interest rates. They've been kind of steadily, the Fed has been kind of trying to nudge them up to choke off inflation, which makes borrowing to buy a house more expensive. And what I've been hearing anyway from afar is that that's had a cooling effect on some of the activity in the market. But you guys are the professionals and you're doing this all the time. Is that
I just looked it up and it's currently 8.5, but you're obviously going to get a range if working with different lenders in and around that. And they've also, I think there was no change in the current rate. So that stabilized things for a little bit, which impacted the market. You know, we were talking about this earlier where if you have a cash buyer, this isn't generally going to affect them. Cash can mean a lot of things, though. I mean, if you're private equity and you're talking to your firm, they probably have a point or two attached to margin loans. So that does affect, that can affect people who are buying cash. So, but where I am, I don't see this as being as impactful. But that's because we have such low inventory. You know, but
Yeah, so down in the South Shore, I would say that we've been heavily impacted by the rising interest rates. There have been so many people who have shot and missed, right? They've tried to buy a home over the last few years, and for whatever different reasons, they have not yet been lucky enough to purchase a home. And so a lot of them have chosen over the last 3 to 6 months to sit it out, and they are now waiting for the market pricing to come down and interest rates to come down. And unfortunately, they really just need to get back into the game, and they need to be looking at price points of homes that they can afford based on the interest rates where they are now. And that's because as soon as the rates start to drop come spring, summer, which all of the major economic brilliant people out there are indicating that they will be dropping at least 1% over the next 12 months. Once we have that interest rate drop, the market's going to be flooded with more buyers. And so now you have more competition. So the price is being pretty stable, interest rates dropping, it's actually going to increase ultimately how much you're paying for that house. So, you know, as they say, marry the house, date the rate. So really the ideal time to get into the market was yesterday. So don't delay on purchasing a home. Buy what you can afford. Make sure that that payment is within reason for you without having to eat ramen noodles every single night. You still want to be able to have a lifestyle and not just be house poor. But then ultimately down the road, you can refinance.
Exactly. I think in my market, we're finding it has almost as much effect on inventory and sellers as it does on buyers right now.
Yes.
People that are sitting on a very attractive rate aren't going to sell and then move somewhere else and have to pay more. So that's one of the many things that's influenced. And we're beginning to see more people willing to sell now, but it's a very gradual process.
Yes.
And the interest rates are not helping that.
And we do some commercial work, and the other issue that's come up is commercial lending has dried up for the business side of the entity. So if they're selling a real estate with a business, the commercial lending is looking solely at the real estate. They're not interested in the business. So that's been pretty fascinating and changing that market.
So what drives the value of a property? I mean, let's just say we're talking in that middle range there. Is it location? Is it condition of the house or the building? The amount of raw land? What are some of the factors? Yes, all of it.
I think Greg had a really good example, and I'll let him tell the story, but when you have a particular buyer looking for a particular type of property that is unique, they might be willing to pay a price for something because it's exactly what they're looking for, but it's a bit more of a needle in a haystack for them. So,
well, it was the interesting thing was this was a couple out of state that were looking both here in Vermont and in Maine, actually. And the property, beautiful cape, post and beam, 17 acres, would not have worked for more than 2 or 3 people because of the 2-bedroom setup. If you could have renovated it and created more space for more people, but in this situation, it was the perfect marriage. And so for them, and also in immaculate shape, easy to show, great sellers. They understood what it took to get things done, and they're looking. And people, boy, are looking from all over the place at our market right now. I mean, I have interest from around the country, globally, which is part of, I think, being at Sotheby's, Four Seasons Sotheby's, and I'm also part of the. I have to shamelessly plug the fact that I'm with the Vermont Sales Group.
Absolutely.
And that's been interesting too for me, joining this team, because I have a lot of input from the other agents I work with on the team. But that was a unique situation.
And I think that you raise a really good point. The cooperation level from the sellers is not something that we really talk about a whole lot, but having your property being easy to show is undoubtedly one of the most important things.
Show ready,
not just in terms of cleanliness, but how flexible are you? So if you are working from home or schooling from home, you might have dogs, you might say, oh gosh, I need 24 or 48 hours. Sometimes you have a buyer who's already scheduled a bunch of showings. Yours was not on the list, but everything else was a strikeout, and now they're adding more. So if you are ready to show same day within a few hours, that's extremely important. Some of those deals get made on the spot like that because of your willingness to accommodate those last minute showing requests.
So
Nothing trumps location. I
Yeah.
think we would all agree.
Yeah.
But location means a lot of things to a lot of different people.
Right.
For some people, it's village and walkability. For some people, it's rural and don't see another neighbor.
Yeah.
I certainly find that since COVID, people want indoor and outdoor living now. So even if they're in a smaller footprint of property, they want to be able to do something outside. They want to have a fire pit, they want to have a porch, they want to barbecue outside, you know.
Right.
So the combination of what you have inside and what you have outside, the condition, absolutely, people do not seem to have the patience. They have the resources often, but they want it looking ready to go. If it's not the color they need, most of them can be convinced that they can repaint when they go
Right,
in.
right.
But they want fresh and new and sparkly clean.
It was remarkable during COVID too, just on that fact in terms of show ready, how many houses would be put on so quickly. Pictures were being taken of the state the house was in, you know, and
Yep.
just littered with personal
Life.
belongings, things all over the place, beds not made. And you would look at this as realtors. I looked at some of them and said, "There's just no way," and it was
Right.
it was off the market in a couple of days.
That market
That
is
is
over.
gone. That's over. Yeah, that's over.
Make your bed.
Goodness.
Yeah, and if you know, there are great examples of really well prepared homes on the market that you should look at if you're thinking of going onto the market.
And I think if we talk about this from like a bell curve perspective, you know, you always are going to have some of those really early adopters, right? So when COVID first hit, there were some people who fled the cities and said, I need to get out. My dogs need to be able to run. My kids need to be able to have some fresh air. And so they moved here very early on, you know, summer of 2020. And then as we move towards, you know, we're kind of now at the tail end of the COVID buying, right? So we've got some late adopters who are still saying, gosh, you know, I didn't want to make a panic buy. I didn't want to leave my friends in my city right away, but now I've reevaluated my life now that this pandemic is behind us, and now I'm still ready to move to Vermont. This is really still what I want to do. So in those cases, because they've had the luxury of time and thinking this through, inspections are much more common. Even with the interest rates, financing is definitely an option. Some of those people are selling. I'm seeing a lot more house sale contingencies happening in the market, and the sellers today have to be willing to entertain those in order to get the highest price for their property. So more contingencies are more common at this point, and just ultimately understanding that the buyers have higher expectations today than they did 1 or 2 or 3 years ago.
Much higher.
Much
Yep.
higher expectations in terms of the condition of the property. Also, we need to talk about the labor shortage. All of the contractors are booked for years at this point. And so to your point about maybe they're willing to paint, but they're not willing to put in a new bathroom. They're not willing to build that garage. So some of those...
Especially if they have to wait.
Right, exactly. So if you don't want to get on the list, you know, to be a client for 2 or 3 years to get that new kitchen, you might want to think about doing a quick refresh. Maybe you can tidy up your kitchen with a new backsplash, or you could paint the cabinets. So it's all of those things that go into what makes a property valuable. It's also about desirable. So as more move-in ready and more easy to show is going to get you a higher price and a faster sale.
And you know, that's, let's face it, part of our value is to come into an individual property and say quite honestly, look, you love your house, I love your house, I wouldn't want to sell it for you if I didn't believe in it. Here are the things I think you could do that aren't going to be hugely expensive and that are going to really make a difference. And then it's up to them, always.
Right.
But you know, we can really provide good counsel there.
I often find that I'm actually taking more things off of their list. There's oftentimes sellers think I have to do all of these things,
Right.
and I say that's not important. Buyers won't
No,
even notice this,
no,
but then I do really help them focus on the things that are going to give them a higher return on investment.
And it's not the time to completely redo a kitchen
No.
because, frankly, your taste may not be the next one's
Yeah,
taste.
Correct.
don't do that. I would
Keep that
always
in
recommend
mind when you're
yeah.
pricing and let
Right.
them come
Let
in
them
and say,
do
I
it.
love the house, I've got enough money left over to do the kitchen the way I want it, rather than...
The
But
price takes into account certain deficiencies, and depending on the property too, I would highly recommend a pre-inspection. I can't stress that enough. It makes a big, big difference. One, because you can find out what's wrong first and fix it,
Yeah.
and two, you can present that as a cost-saving aspect to
I
them.
love that. I
Absolutely.
haven't been terribly
Yeah.
effective
And
in
it's not
convincing
that
too many
expensive.
sellers of doing it. but
No,
I
they're
think
not,
it's-
and it
it's a
isn't that
great-
expensive either
No.
when you think about the
Right.
overall.
Yeah, general maintenance things, you know, having the boiler cleaned and serviced, having the septic pumped, all of those are things that today buyers expect to be done, rather than just saying, well, I'll wait and let them ask me. We're saying, no, please be more proactive about that stuff.
Well, and if you do that, let's say you do a septic inspection and you do a property inspection beforehand, you're not going to be under contract and you're not going to be basically active under contract where people will see that and not decide to take a look at your property, and you're not off the market, but you're essentially out of view or not top of mind for a lot of buyers during that period. If you had that done beforehand, that takes all of that out of the equation during that period that you're under contract. And you're not going to be surprised at, 23, 24 days in that something came up that you didn't expect that really could submerge
You know,
the
most
deal.
properties we're not required to, but our firm certainly tries to get every seller to fill out what's called a seller's property information report.
All right.
And that's basically just, here's what I know and what I don't know about this property, but it's quite thorough. And I find that buyers are now looking at that much more carefully, and it's one of the first things I point to when I tell them to look at the supporting documents. And if they see a lot of questions in there and they can't get answers to them, they may be less interested in even looking. You know,
We're
I
not
think-
septic engineers, but boy, could
Yeah.
we talk about.
Oh boy, let's not. But you know, the internet has totally changed our business as it's changed the world.
Right.
And the majority of the work people do is going to be online before they ever look at anything now.
Right.
So our biggest initial job is to get that property looking good and fully documented online when we go up.
Yeah.
Because people will, with a good realtor guiding them, will go deep into that before they decide if they even want to look.
Yeah.
Correct.
I was just wondering, are you seeing a lot of customers saying, you know, I really want a house with a heat pump as opposed to an old-fashioned oil furnace? Is that some of those sort of environmental climate factors kicking into calculations, or is it nice to have like a solar array on the roof or something like that?
People are interested in that. I don't find that they're expecting it or shopping for it yet.
Agreed.
But it's going to be on the rise.
I mean, with that in mind, we added, our house was originally electric heat, built in the 80s, and there was also, at some point they put in forced hot air on the first floor, so now we have electric forced hot air, and then a wood stove and 2 wood stoves. You know, it's almost silly, but it's part of the world we live in. And but the second floor was all electric heat. So with an eye on resale value, we added all mini splits upstairs.
Yeah.
And first of all, it's made a huge difference. It's just better. It's been better all around. But you need the electric as a backup, because somewhere around 15 below is where that stops working. And when people, you can't just rely on one source. If you're using mini splits, that's one thing we found.
Right.
But probably not unlike others, we have every possible heating source, you know, that's out there practically.
No.
And when we built our house brand new, we designed the entire thing around a solar system and having the entire house heated by heat pump mini splits. And we actually have a ducted system on the second floor. There's a large trunk that runs up through the attic, so there's heat vents and AC vents going into every room. But then the main level is all with the little head units that you see in restaurants and things like that, where they have to retrofit. So I don't see that people are shopping for them, but they do want air conditioning. So
It makes a big difference.
It's a
Yeah.
very big difference. I think
The air
that the
does.
climate awareness,
Right.
there's obviously Vermont went through devastating floods this summer, and so we are not necessarily insulated from these natural disasters that are happening all across the country. But for many, many years, people did think of us as a place to escape the risk of wildfires or hurricanes. So I think that the flood zone thing is actually more of a taboo at this point. People are really leery of buying a property that's in a flood zone where you already know that risk. But I definitely see that people want air conditioning, that our
Well,
summers
it's
are getting
warmer,
hotter.
right? And people say, "Oh, you don't need air conditioning." And now there's probably more days that I've noticed in the last 14 years that we've been here that the air conditioning has played a bigger part in our.
So I do think that both from
Summers.
an owner's comfort of having heat pumps, you know, you get to enjoy it, but then it is also very positive for resale. So to your point, buyers are not saying, I must have this, but it would probably give you a leg up over a house that does not have that central air.
Yep.
Yeah, I just wondered, because for a while it seemed like Vermont was perceived as a climate haven, place where, you know,
Yes.
some of the wildfires and other, you know, climate change events we were seeing elsewhere, where we were kind of insulated to some degree from that. So I just wondered if that was the case. I mean, are you still seeing customers motivated by those sorts of that factor, or is that kind of?
We're seeing some climate migration. We're seeing some political migration. We're seeing a lot of interesting migration, actually. And if the inventory was higher, I would think it would be more evident. But yeah, I've gotten calls from. I got a call from a guy in Texas said it's just too hot.
Yeah.
It's just
Absolutely.
too damn hot, and I'm coming up to Vermont.
Several buyers over the last year have moved here from Florida, Georgia, Texas.
Right.
It was a brutally hot summer for them. I have a friend in Phoenix, and it was over 100 degrees every day this summer in Phoenix. So,
Right.
yes, absolutely.
And if it's not the
People are moving
heat, it's the encroaching water.
Right.
There's a lot of interesting issues.
And even the New York Times had an article recently that talked about effective climate on various regions. And they singled out Vermont as still one of the places that more people are going. And they said even with the recent flooding, and not to deny how devastating that flooding was in many places, but it is still somewhat contained.
Right.
And, I've had people shopping from the Cape who say, my waterfront house is going to be underwater in 25 years. I'd rather be in Vermont than up on a hill somewhere, So it is a factor.
Interesting. Well, let me shift here to a recent story that was in the local papers. Jennifer, I'll turn to you on this one. This is about real estate scams. I guess, are there people out there who are posing as sellers and attract unsuspecting, unwary potential buyers? I mean, what is that all about?
So I'm not sure what you guys are seeing in your markets, but we have almost no land for sale anymore. So with the last 3 years, very low inventory, tons of homes have sold that used to lag on the market. And so then all of a sudden the land started being scooped up as well for those who could afford to build, started buying up all that land. And so I haven't had a land listing in months, maybe even a year.
Just raw land.
Right, just raw land. And so when I get a call for someone who wants to list land, ooh, yay, I'm very excited. I love selling land. My husband's a builder, so I just have a lot of excitement around helping people start from the ground up. So I got a call, actually I'll take that back. I got an email from someone, it was a Realtor.com lead, and not uncommon for conversations to start that way. And they were very detailed right up front. They gave me the address of the land that they own, explained that they moved away, that they don't live here anymore. Wanted a very comprehensive market analysis to understand what the value of the property was, didn't want me just to throw a number out shooting from the hip. And I said, of course, I'm glad to do a detailed report for you. Went through all of my typical steps of gathering the public documents, visiting the property, and then researching the multiple listing service for those comparable sales. I sent off all of that data to the seller, and they agreed with my analysis, and they were ready to proceed. And then something just didn't sit right with me. I just had this nagging bad feeling. And I had recently read an article in Realtor Magazine, and I had also seen something in one of their newsletters. It was a video explaining this scam and how you really do need to verify people's identity. So I actually wrote that back to him in my email, and I said, land scams are on the rise, and I need to do some due diligence to verify who you are. And I asked them to send me photo identification. I received images of their passports. I'm double checking all this information. I'm comparing it to my own passport to see if it looks faked or in any way. Looked very legitimate. And so from there, I just still had this bad feeling, and I ended up delving into the tax bill had the mailing address for where the tax bill goes in Pennsylvania. I called the town clerk's office there. I said, this is going to be the strangest phone call you get all day. And I explained what I was trying to do. Eventually, I got through to the voter registration office where they gave me the phone number for the real person, because I wanted to have some way of me gathering the data. Who is this person? How can I reach them? Rather than just trusting the email and the phone number that they're giving me, that the scammer gave me. So I did. I got a hold of the real owner. I said, do you know who I am? They had no idea. I said, well, we've been emailing for a week, and that someone is posing as you and trying to get me to list your land. And they were totally shocked. They had moved away about 30 years ago. So they've been paying taxes on this property for 30 years, and it almost got stolen from them. The scam is that I would have listed it, somebody else would have brought a buyer, that buyer would have paid money for it, that land transfer would have been recorded. It would have been a legal land transfer, and the scammer would have gotten the money wired to them. that scammer is going to be impossible to track down. The FBI is not interested in tracking sales under, and scams, I should say, under $50,000. It's just not rising to the level of their manpower being appointed to that task. So the Attorney General's office is the one that you need to reach out to here in the state of Vermont. They are investigating these cases as much as possible, but it's very clever scam. There have been many realtors who've reached out to me since I came forward with my story, and they told me that they were a party to a scam that either they listed and discovered. A neighbor was like, "Hey, Joe, are you trying to sell your land?" And he was like, "No." Well, there's a for sale sign. And so sometimes it comes about that way. And then others have actually gotten to the closing table and closed. And at that point, it's a long litigation process involving title insurance because there's really both parties have now been injured. You have the seller whose land has been taken from them. How are they going to get their land back? And then how are you going to reimburse the buyer who has paid money for this land that now they don't really legally own? It's a very messy situation.
So the people who were scammed out of their property, do they get to keep it in the end when all the dust is settled?
It's up to the courts to decide that.
Wow.
This is also happening
You guys see
in
this sort of thing?
Oh yeah, when I was doing rentals, they skim your listing and then they put it up on Craigslist is notorious. And it was interesting because it went from your rental showing up there with somebody's phone number and information to contact, usually through email only, and send a deposit to somebody. You didn't even know who it was. But then it got a little bit more interesting where they took my name and attached it to it and was using a fake email address for me. And I contacted Craigslist and those disappeared instantly once. But if you're selling, you should also go ahead and check to make sure your listings are not showing up on Craigslist and other sites. Because they will skim actual listings, not only rentals, but homes for sale.
That happened to me when my husband and I were selling our house in spring of 2020. It showed up on Craigslist, and several people, of course, reached out to me asking, "Is this really for rent?" Because I also see the for sale sign. And I actually called. There was a phone number. I called the scammer myself. And I said, "It's my house. You better take this down." And I did flag it several times on Craigslist. It did disappear eventually, but I don't know how many people lost money because they sent in
Sending money
in lieu of keys, right? That they'll say, "Oh, we'll mail you the keys as soon as we get your deposit." The one worst case I ever had was a family that called me on Christmas Eve. They had pulled up in front of a house that they thought that they had rented and that they had sent money, and they were told that the key would be under the mat in front of the front door, and it was a house that I had for sale. Nobody had alerted me that the scam was out there, so I couldn't flag it in any way. And they had sent $3,000. They said it was everything that they had. Their kids were in the car. They were totally packed up and ready to move in, and now they were homeless.
Oh my God. Oh, that's awful. Well, before we have to run, I just had one other quick question, kind of on the legal arena. A lot of news about a lawsuit that the National Association of Realtors, about commission rates. I confess, this one had me completely confused. So I was wondering if one of you could sort of explain
Jennifer's just
what's
come
going
back
on.
from the national conference, so why don't you
Well,
start by
and also we should say, what was you were named,
graduated?
You graduated.
I just graduated from the National Association of Realtors Leadership Academy a week ago.
Congratulations.
Yeah,
Thank you very much.
congratulations.
So what's really important is that all consumers have to understand that all commissions are negotiable. There is no set fee. There is no standard. So every single market is unique. And within a market, you can find realtors who will list and help you buy properties at different rates. Sometimes it's a percentage of the sale price. Sometimes that's on the gross or the net, or it could be a flat fee. So there's a wide range of commissions that are available to you, and it's up to you as the consumer to do your due diligence of figuring out where are you going to get the best bang for your buck. So if you are looking for a full service realtor who is going to help you with the clean out and the staging and finding the people to do the repairs and the painting and all of that, yes, you will likely pay a higher fee for that person's service. If you are looking to take the photos yourself and want to advertise the property with an unmade bed and don't mind if your realtor is very hands-off, you might pay a discounted broker fee. So it's very important for consumers to know that there is no standard and that we all have our own value propositions.
Okay, because it sounds like a very complicated case, at least to me anyway, but again, that's a good reason why I never went to law school. Interesting. Yeah, well, I suppose something to be followed as we go forward, but
it's
anyway.
going to take years in order to have that actually filter down into what the final outcome is going to be. The National Association of Realtors will be filing an appeal very soon. In my opinion, the verdict was absolutely false. The jury did not understand the merits of the case. We are right on the law and on the facts, and ultimately we do hope that the verdict is overturned.
Okay, all right. So basically then it sounds like it's still a good time to be a seller, but if you want to wait till next year?
It's a good time to be both, honestly. You know, I think, again, as I was saying earlier, I think it's a healthier time for our business. We could definitely use more product, and we're all working hard to have that happen, and I think we all are hopeful that by certainly next summer, we may see that in a variety of ways and for a variety of reasons, but I tell people that I'm selling quality of life. And I strongly believe, as I think we all do because we're lucky enough to live here, that no place is perfect. But there is so much about living in Vermont, and if you're able to, owning property in Vermont. We've got often very, very good educational system. We've got great arts and culture. We've got a wonderful farm-to-table food scene. We've got even affordable, free outdoor recreation, not to mention the more expensive but very high-level outdoor recreation opportunities. You know, there are so many good things about this area, and we did not recover as quickly as the north of the state for reasons I've never understood after the dip of 2009, 2010. And what I've been telling people is that in the process of about 2 years of COVID, we had to make up for 10 years of stasis, basically. And I do not think we're overpriced now. I think we are still a bargain for what we deliver. And when I have people coming from more urban areas and looking at what they can get here for their dollar and what surrounds it, that's what they're investing in, and that's why we're still selling, and that's why we hope to, you know, still build this area in the most positive ways. So I'm very, very optimistic.
And I will say that we are stewards of the American dream. Owning a home is what really is the epitome of the American dream for the vast majority of Americans. And owners of real property have 40 times the wealth of renters. So that is the way forward. That's how you can build generational wealth, whether it is for you to live in the home yourself, perhaps it's a multifamily. That's actually seen a large boom in the last few years. They used to really lag in my market, and now multifamilies sell like hotcakes, just like single family homes do. So that is really a way for you to move yourself ahead financially, is to invest in real estate.
And I think we're all concerned in our areas about the affordability of, you know, first-time home buyers, less expensive housing. Much of the local workforce cannot afford to buy here and often can't even find a rental. And we've all seen that the businesses are still understaffed.
Right.
So, you know, by no means are we only looking at trying to serve the high-end market. We're all trying to see what we can do to make affordable housing happen through a variety of ventures. And it's in our interest and the good of the community that we do that. So it is a concern.
I worked with a couple of first-time home buyers recently, and it was a great experience. And so I encourage them to jump in, and especially when you compare your rent to your mortgage solutions. Even, you know, 8.5% sounds really scary, but it's nothing like the 13s and 14s that we saw when I was jumping into the market back in the day, and it was a long time ago.
I'm just grateful I didn't realize, just how expensive that was back when I was doing that,
Right.
back in the 80s.
Well, it's one way,
It's
the
like-
prices will go down,
it's
rates
like,
will go
oh.
up, rates will go up, and prices will come down. But we're right we're not in that ratio hasn't taken effect. We're sort of right
We're
in
leveling.
this, we're sort of
Yeah.
leveling
Agree.
a little bit right now.
I think the bottom line is whether you're buying or selling in Vermont, you've got a good solid value now, and we're happy to be a part of making that match.
And the one thing also, to your point, of all those great assets still living here is our proximity to New York City and Hartford and Boston, and it's no big deal getting up to Burlington. We really, but the arts and all of our shopping, arts, dining, recreational in this area is unsurpassed.
And our infrastructure is making progress. Now, it used to be you couldn't get here, and now increasingly you can. And we have more reliable internet, and with the change
Yeah.
to at least hybrid work, we're finding this was a great place to live and a hard place to make a living. But now you can transport many
Right.
types of living here
Yeah.
because they can be largely
So
hybrid.
you're still seeing a lot of remote workers coming
Yes.
here?
Yes.
Absolutely.
So, again, my sense of it was that was beginning to fade a bit, and it's kind of going to be more back to the office like the good old days. But no.
Vermont has a lot of entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
There's a lot of self-employed folks here in Vermont. So when I was in my first NARLA class in January, Dr. Lawrence Yoon, the chief economist for the National Association of Realtors, put a big map up on the board, and we saw that Vermont had W-2 wage growth was in the negative compared to most other parts of the country. And when I really drilled down into that with him, I said, but are we really losing jobs? I said, because we've actually had a ton of new people come here. I said, they're simply not W-2 employees. They are 1099 employees. They are self-employed. And that was a very good point that he was not taking into account in that graph.
I don't know why, but United Van Line says everybody's moving to Vermont, and
Yeah.
that comes up over and over again.
The last few
And,
years.
yeah, exactly. But I want to dive into that a little bit deeper to see, but apparently they're all
Yeah, because
coming here.
the last batch of numbers I saw was the state's population had barely nudged ahead, but I don't know.
That's a good
see.
point. Right, exactly. Who are these United Van Line people?
What are they doing here?
Where are
Anyway.
they coming from in actuality?
Well, I mean, if you compare us to California, we are an extraordinary value compared to what California real estate costs. So I've had several buyers over the last year say, I'm going to sell my multi-million-dollar home in California and buy what feels like
5 homes in Vermont.
right. What feels like a comparable or
Yeah.
better property here, but for a drop in the bucket compared to what it would cost in California. So
Right.
we absolutely are a very desirable place, and I think that people are really appreciating that, whether it's because of the climate issues that are happening or now the remote work that's possible, our incredible recreation that we have here. Vermont has so much to love about it.
Like Greg's band.
Right, exactly.
Talk about outdoor recreation.
Can I say, yeah, Muddy Hollow.
Shamelessly again.
Shamelessly Muddy Hollow.
Well, on that note, no pun intended, we'll have to leave it there for today. But once again, I wanted to thank Steve Stetler, Jennifer Prouty-Huffman, and Greg Cutler to bring us up to speed here on what's happening in the real estate scene. Always great to have you in. I think we'll have to leave Zoom calls behind us in the distant past, and when we get to our
Let's
next
hope.
go around and conversation, we'll be right back here at the square table. All right.
Thanks,
well,
Andrew.
Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you.
And thanks to all of you who have been with us today. Hope you found it interesting, and well, we'll see you again the next time. Meanwhile, take care.